What up, everyone? We are live here with the ProbsCast. Thank y'all so much for joining me once again. However, you're listening to me, whether it be on Spotify, where a majority of y'all are, but remember, I'm also on YouTube at the ProbsCast. So definitely give me a subscribe because obviously I'm new here, and so a lot of surprise. Normally I have guests on. That's kind of how I built this podcast. What a lot of people don't know is that I had a lot of podcasts in the past, or I say a lot. I had one more before this. Um, it was called Keaton It Real. It was a while back. It's actually what my personal Twitter handle is. But I really do think that I built this podcast up really well, and I'm not to some standpoint of getting record breaking contracts or trying to do this full time. I have a day job. I do, and for any of the students that are current at Oklahoma State, and want something like this, the best advice that I give out to people is to just go out and do it. And I really have put my best foot forward. And what I've had on guys like Tyreek Hill, Mason Rudolph recently, I had Alan Bowman on. And let me tell you something, I have a lot of guests coming as well. And, the reason I was really doing a podcast by myself, I had JC Hoyt, she was going to come on, and she actually canceled on me. She told me that she had something come up, and that's fine. JC and I have been talking. I say JC, Coach Hoyt and I have been talking for a long time, and I think she's doing wonders for the program, and I think she's a great representation of what especially with women's basketball, putting up record numbers all of a sudden. I think JC Hoyt really has turned the program around, and I'm really excited to bring her on. So, JC, if you're listening to this, which you're probably not. But I can't wait to have you on, and I hope whenever you get back from Europe, we can make that work. But ultimately, I just want to make sure I didn't miss a week because last week I was at a wedding down in Galveston, Texas. I was with a lot of Michigan law students, and with the conference realignment that occurred, it was actually the groom. He was in law school in Michigan. We both grew up down the street from each other. He introduced me to the Nintendo 64. It's a great guy. But his younger brother, I'm great friends with, he went to Baylor. So, while we were at the happy hour the night before, all of a sudden we get home Friday night, and he starts blowing up my phone talking about conference realignment and what I know and things like that. And, I really believe that, there's a reason that you're listening to this podcast. There's a reason that I have some pretty decent numbers behind what I'm doing. And I kind of need to clear the air a little bit because I get a lot of questions. Obviously, I didn't start OK State Probs. Beforehand, I was with Barstool Sports, running the Barstool Oklahoma State account. I was really limited in what my abilities were there. And, ultimately, when I found myself with OK State Probs, Will Fight was running it for, and Brendan Morris started it. And, they came to me and I was like, how come y'all haven't done a podcast? And they were like, oh, we just, we talked about it. We might've called it the ProbsCast. And I was like, all right, well, I'm going to take a whack at that. And, once I graduated last year, I moved out to Florida. I was working for NASCAR in Daytona Beach, Florida, thinking that might be my kick. But then Pokes with a Purpose reached out to me, NIL Collective. And, they told me, they were about $30,000 in the holes about what they spent to set it up. And I was like, hey, let me handle the social media. You don't have to pay me a dime. Anytime I want to go to a game, just help me out. Because, I love Oklahoma State athletics, and that's what I want. And they were like, absolutely. And I still haven't taken a dime. I don't want to take money from the athletes. And if anyone knows, I do a lot of social media in general. So it doesn't bother me at all to help where I can. I just want to clear the air there and kind of show that, I'm integrated a lot with these athletes, and I'm not paid by anyone to where like, oh, I got to spin the agenda or something like that. I love what I do, and I love producing the content that I do. Like I said in the beginning, I have a day job that I really enjoy, and I skipped NASCAR after about a year because I was like, you know what, I can go back, I can get a day job, I can be closer to Stillwater in Fort Worth, Texas, and I can work for Pokes with a Purpose, and ultimately kind of start doing the podcast thing again a lot. And like I said, follow me on YouTube. I'm also on TikTok. I upload clips there all the time. I'm trying to figure out ways to get paid, and not paid by anyone bigger where it's spinning anything. But yeah, so I just want to clear the air, make sure everyone kind of knew where I was, and why people listen to my podcast, and the things that I hear. There have been tons of things that have been told to me that I wish I had been running the ProbsCast. Like for example, Musa Cisse. I knew he was going to Ole Miss a while before, and I had Spencer Sanders on. Spencer Sanders is one of my good friends, and I rarely talk bad about him. I think Spencer's a great character of people, and I can tell you numerous stories on how Spencer really helped me out and starting this podcast, being one of the big guests that I got on in the beginning, and I ultimately think he's a great guy, and I don't support. I support Oklahoma State, and yeah, of course, I'm friends with a lot of the athletes, but it's really hard for me to root for other teams. I'm wearing an I Miss Johnny Manziel shirt. I ordered from Toxic Tailgate. They got a lot of wild shirts on there. My girlfriend works for Texas A&M. That's a whole nother story, but I had to get something that was neutral that I could wear to the games, where I wasn't full-fledged. And but other than that, with Spencer Sanders and all the other great stories that these guys tell me and the interactions that I have, I think it's a little wild in the college football world. I think that everything said in the college football world, people are going crazy. The transfer portal is ruining college football, or NIL is ruining college football. Conference realignment is ruining college football. And I think that there are some pros and some cons on this that a lot of people are missing out on. And it's almost like what Gundy was saying at a media day the other day was politics and religion are the equivalent of NIL and conference realignment. It's just something that you don't really want to talk about because people are so split on it. And I treat it the same way. With politics, I feel like if you're a full-on conservative and there's aliens in the White House, or you're a full liberal, and there all that kind of unjustified talk and conversations that'll never be solved. It's kind of the same thing. You don't want to be all the way one way. You don't want to be all the way the other way. You want to find yourself somewhere in the middle. And I think that a lot of people are missing out on the pros and cons of what has come to surface. Now, obviously, you can point out the cons. I think, especially working in NASCAR, I was in sales. I was talking to the most conservative fan base you could ever meet. And one day I asked someone in the office. He's a great guy to me. His name is Phil. And Phil is very talented at his job, but he's a diehard NASCAR fan. And he told me, or I told him, I said, hey, man, can you name one change in NASCAR that, you enjoyed? And he goes, he thought for a minute, and he said, no, I can't name one. And I was like, well, then that means there's a problem with the fans because, there's pros and cons to everything. So anyways, with NIL, I feel like Oklahoma State typically isn't known for having a whole lot of money. Sure, we had Boone Pickens, and a lot has come since the early 2000s, but 2010 is really whenever Oklahoma State started kicking everyone's ass. And beforehand, if we lost the recruiting battle to, anyway, let's say Texas, right? Everyone say, well, he's probably getting paid under the table. Well, if he was getting paid under the table then, and you think that NIL is ruining college football, well, then what's the difference with it now? I mean, sure, name, image, likeness. That's how they put a standpoint on it. And clearly I work with Post the Purpose, but NIL really stands for now it's legal. And it's the truth. It's a whole deal that people want to have conversations about that, I don't really understand. I'm like, well, if they were getting paid in the past, they're probably getting paid now. And I hear a lot of it, and I don't get upset. I do the social media and marketing for Post the Purpose, and I'm more than happy to do that. I love doing anything that I can do to help out Oklahoma State. It's my alma mater. But at the same time, let's all be realistic with each other on what the problem is. And obviously these kids, yeah, there's probably some getting paid a whole lot. And I could easily name a couple that we'd lost recruiting battles because they wanted a bunch of money. But at the same time, it's like the guys that ask for the most money are the ones who wind up in the most obscure places, in my opinion, from what I've seen. And watching a lot of these guys, like you'll maybe like not like, oh, why did they go to Appalachian State over Alabama or something crazy like that? But definitely somewhere where you wouldn't think there was a huge culture boost or a super winning tradition, and they wind up there. Those are typically the kids where the NIL collectors over there will shell out $1 million for some 19, 20-year-old to go play football for them. And I'm not trying to give hints of anything. I really don't care about that. But with the NIL stuff, it's like, well, what truly is the problem with it if it was always going on in the eyes of all college football fans? The next on the agenda, and we were talking about conference realignment a little bit earlier, is with conference realignment, there's pros and cons to it as well. And I'm stoked personally. We're going to be able to get Utah, Arizona State, and Colorado. And, I think that Brett Yormark has done a remarkable job. I mean, the Pac-12 has been going on for over 100 years. And Brett Yormark, everyone, well, what did the Oregon coach say? He was like, oh, well, what did we really lose by losing Oregon? Well, they're secretly talking under the table about joining the Big Ten. It baffles me the way that college football fans, one of the big cliches is saying, oh, well, the SEC just has a tougher schedule. Yes, they have a tougher schedule. And typically the SEC does recruit at a higher level. I think we can all see that, but at the same time, it's like, who wants to watch the same schedules over and over and over and over when you have the possibility of now watching Oregon go to Ohio State, or vice versa? You get to watch USC with Lincoln Riley go into a whiteout game. I think that's awesome personally. I think everyone's going to tune into those games, and I see a lot of it. Obviously, I do the OK State prep stuff. I get people responding all the time, and I can see the flaws in it. What's going to happen to women's soccer at a lot of these universities? How are you going to play weekday games if you go to UCLA and you got a game at Rutgers? I think that is a problem that they're going to have to solve, and I don't have a whole lot of solutions for it personally. I believe if I had a say in any of it, is that they would come out with a commissioner and we'd all kind of go back to, where we started, and there'd be more regionalized situations. But, what really drives these networks to bring in these huge teams is because people want to see those matchups. And I think that majority of people do. It just sucks for a lot of us. I mean, what's going to happen to Oregon State? What's going to happen to Washington State? What's going to happen to Stanford, who holds, I'm pretty sure at this current moment, they hold the most NCAA trophies amongst all sports, and everyone's telling them, piss off. I mean, that's wild. For my radio audience, I'm having to take a little drink of water. It's getting heated in here. But yeah, I don't necessarily see the problem in a lot of these conferences adding bigger games. And I think that you can point the finger and say, oh, it's because the Longhorn Network. You can point the finger and say, well, USC and UCLA really screwed this up. And there might be some truth behind that. I think that there's pros and cons to everything in life, y'all. And if you can't see the pro or the con, you're probably one of the dumbasses that can't figure it out. I think people are going to be more than excited to watch these bigger games. And I, for one, am excited that Oklahoma State gets to go to BYU. We get to go to Orlando. We get to go to Utah. I think it's going to be really fascinating. And obviously this is a network deal. I don't think anyone's opposed to that. I mean, we and let me tell you something. It's not done yet. It's not. My girlfriend works at Texas A&M, but she got her master's and her undergrad at Florida State. And she's constantly bringing up, where's my alma mater about to land? And I told her, I was like, hey, it's the talk of the town right now. And it was the AD or the coach at Florida State. He said it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when and how. They're leaving. And I don't put it any far past. If I'm being a Big 12 homer and I'm rooting for Oklahoma State and the credibility, everything like that, I got to say, I don't think any of the schools that we're adding really are a standout university. And it's no knock on the schools that we've added. It's really just a matter of, if we go undefeated with this current schedule we have, no one's going to consider those credible wins. I mean, OU's a dumpster fire. And, if we win the last Bedlam, absolutely. I'm going to be fired up. I'm going to be there, the whole shebang. But, I mean, it's a dumpster fire over there. And, yes, absolutely, it's going to be a lot easier than getting the snot kicked out of us by Brian Kelly and the LSU Tigers in Baton Rouge. But at the same time, if I'm being a Big 12 homer, Brett Yormark, don't put anything past him, because he saved this conference single-handedly. And he's a genius pulling Colorado. He knew Colorado would leave. And that's what helped the Jenga blocks fall. But if I'm being a Big 12 homer, Florida State and Miami, not Clemson, Florida State and Miami are the two schools that I want, because even though Miami's been in a dumpster fire for however long, Florida State's finally getting their act back together. I actually got to go watch them last year in New Orleans play LSU. This is before I was dating the girl I'm dating. It's a hell of a game. And Florida State wants to be in the SEC. But ultimately, months and months ago, I can't remember, it might have been the same guy from Florida State. He said it's not a matter of if or whatever. But Florida State said it's absolutely unacceptable that UCF is getting a more money off of media deals than they are. And the ACC is about to topple. Now, will it be by August 15th? Because August 15th is the cutoff date. I don't know. But I do know within the next 18 months that none of this is over with. And I, for one, am excited. You know, I would love for the Big 12 to have Florida State and then UCF and Miami, and then have 4 schools in Texas. I mean, that's a hell of a recruiting trail right there. And we all know that Texas pumps the full numbers of college athletes. And, you know, Florida, I believe, is second. And if you want to go and argue California, sure. Okay, California puts it out there. That's fine. But ultimately, that would be my perfect picture for the Big 12, is to go snag those two, because those are flagship universities that absolutely dominate in their field and look like credible wins. And it's not that far. Now, for other sports, absolutely. I think it would be a little oddball situation. And you got to remember, too, you know, a lot of, like, let's talk about softball for a minute. Well, we did a whole tournament down in Mexico last year. I didn't hear anyone talking about that. But I'm really happy I get to do a podcast by myself, by the way. I haven't done one of these in forever. And forever's tuning in. I really do appreciate all your work. For anyone who has a company out there and wants some cheap advertising dollars, I mean, I'll take them. I'll post you wherever you want. I'll wear your merchandise, whatever it may be, because I absolutely love my job here. But moving on to Oklahoma State, you know, I get a lot of questions about what I honestly think Oklahoma State's record is going to be. And obviously on Twitter, you know, I have an agenda to push. You know, I like being the big account for Oklahoma State and being the one people refer to, collaborating with a lot of content creators and things like that. But when it comes to Oklahoma State's record, I mean, there's no reason in hell that Oklahoma State can't run this table. And you look at our schedule, and it's like, okay, we play one Texas school this year. We don't get TCU, Baylor, Texas Tech. I don't know how Texas avoided the bullet of Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State, Texas has beaten Oklahoma State once at home since 2010. And that's something that, you know, it looks like they got their hand in that schedule, choosing their games. But when it comes to Oklahoma State's schedule, you know, I think that there's a real methodical way of thinking about what wins in college football. And, you know, I think there's 2 houses that you can win from. I think that obviously having the best players at every position, that's what wins college football games. But if we're really getting into it and we want to simplify it, boil it down, the truth of the, you know, fact is that you got to have a quarterback, you got to have a coach is the first house, right? Obviously, you need some great players around him. Absolutely. O-line, whatever it may be. But then the second house is you need a rocking defense. And one of the craziest parts about Oklahoma State is where we have Colin Oliver, who was a freshman 2 years ago, lighting up college football. He's had 3 defensive – he's on his 3rd defensive coordinator now. But Keaton, the transfer portal, we lost so many players. Did we really? I mean, Oklahoma State, we retained Kendall Daniels. We got Colin Oliver. We went and got Alan Bowman, obviously friend of the podcast. He's a great guy. But, I mean, you look at who we really lost, and it's like we didn't really lose much. Oh, we lost Trace Ford. What do you have, 8 tackles and 1 sack? And Trace Ford has DM'd me. and I, I mean, I didn't have a problem with him while I was at Oklahoma State, and then I got no problem with anyone that transfers. Like I said, I root for Oklahoma State, but I'm also not going to throw roses at someone who's going to go to the enemy, and they've been in this culture long enough to know what's going on, Kelly Maxwell, Trace Ford. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, that's my job, and it blows my mind that shocks them. But for the most part, if you have a rocking defense, such as a Georgia the last 2 seasons, that's going to win it for you. Before that, what were we talking about? Joe Burrow, right? Trevor Lawrence. And there's a methodical way to win in college football, and I think we got the coach right. As a matter of fact, I don't think, I know we have the coach right. Oh, but he can't beat Oklahoma. Jim Harbaugh couldn't beat Ohio State. This isn't like a weird way of thinking. I think that with the cards that have been dealt in front of us, it's going to be a hell of a season. Oh, and Alan Bowman's a great guy. And I figured Gundy was going to end up enjoying the transfer portal a little bit more, and he's become more accustomed to it. I get to hear it all day long at Post to the Purpose, how he's more embracive of it, and Gundy loves this team more than I could ever imagine, than any of us could ever imagine. And I think that he does get a little lopsided with that, because he whenever people get critical of him, he kind of curls up a little bit because he thinks we don't understand, and we don't. We show up on Saturdays to root for what he's been putting together his entire life, and I think he does a hell of a job at it. But with the transfer portal, it's like you no longer have to deal with a freshman quarterback. So he goes and gets Alan Bowman. And Alan Bowman was a stud at Texas Tech. He had 2 collapsed lungs, broken rib cage. I mean, the kid was put through hell. So, I mean, I'm excited personally. But, yeah, when it comes to Oklahoma State and their season upcoming, I'm not the slightest bit concerned. We have Brennan Presley. We have a deep running back room. Kendall Daniels and Colin Oliver on the defensive side of the ball. It should be a hell of a season. And I get to go to a lot of games myself. I get to go to I get to go to Texas A&M games. I'm going to go to the Arkansas Texas A&M game. 3 of my younger brothers are in Arkansas right now. I'm going to have a lot of exciting football, and I'm hyped up for Oklahoma State in general. I think Gundy plays better whenever we are under the radar, and I think that he does a great job at putting together a team. And I can't stress it enough, but all the people coming out saying that Oklahoma State is going to be terrible, they got gutted in the transfer portal, and all these different things. It's kind of like, what's the real argument there? Because you read something on Twitter. Twitter's not real. People don't talk like they do on Twitter. Like, that's a ridiculous way of thinking that Oklahoma State isn't going to be that good. But I am hyped for conference realignment. I think the NIL arguments are ridiculous, because they're the same people saying that they were getting paid under the table beforehand, and I think that it's going to be great for college football with what's upcoming. So, other than that, I really do appreciate y'all. It's going to be a short podcast. I'm recording this the night before, so I really appreciate y'all. Follow me on Twitter at OKStateProbs, TikTok, the ProbsCast, Instagram, Instagram, OK State Probs. It's going to be one of the two, but make sure you subscribe. That's how I get paid, and I don't have to go to some bigger media outlet where they want me to say this and that. And I'd rather just give it to y'all the exact way that y'all want it. So appreciate y'all. Peace.